Amanda Mitchell's fingers traced the cool crystalline railing of the Galactic Council's visitor gallery, her breath slightly fogging the transparent material that separated her from what should have been humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph. At 17, she was probably the youngest human to ever witness council proceedings, a privilege earned by being the daughter of Earth's chief diplomat, James Mitchell. The council chamber itself was a testament to alien engineering. A vast amphitheater hewn from a single piece of living crystal that pulsed with subtle bioluminescence. Tiered seats rose in elegant spirals, occupied by representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The Vraxians with their iridescent scales, the ethereal Luztan who seemed to float above their seats, and dozens of other species that made Amanda's xenobiology-loving heart race with excitement. Her father stood at the center of it all, his diplomatic uniform crisp and perfect as always. He looked so small from up here, but his voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement field. Honorable council members, James Mitchell's voice was steady, measured. Humanity comes before you not as supplicants, but as partners. In the 50 years since first contact, we have demonstrated our commitment to peaceful cooperation, technological exchange, and cultural understanding. We believe the time has come for Earth to take its place among the Galactic Council's full members. Amanda held her breath. This was the moment they'd spent years preparing for. Her father had practiced this speech countless times at their dinner table, refined every word, every gesture. She knew what came next. The carefully prepared presentations on human achievements, the economic projections, the cultural exchange proposals. The interruption caught everyone off guard. Esteemed colleagues, High Counselor Vextra of the Vraxian Empire rose, his scales shifting from their usual blue to a deep purple that Amanda had never seen before. Before the human continues his presentation, I believe we should review some relevant historical data. The chamber's holographic system activated, filling the air with images that made Amanda's blood run cold. Warfare, human warfare, but not the sanitized version from history books. These were raw feeds, somehow extracted from Earth's most classified archives. World War II's Pacific theaters, Vietnam, the Middle Eastern conflicts, urban warfare and the water wars of 2039. Each seemed more brutal than the last, showing humanity at its absolute worst. Observe, Vextra's voice dripped with disdain. The species requesting membership among civilized races. Note their methods of combat, not the clean efficiency of energy weapons, but brutal kinetic warfare designed to maximize suffering. They don't merely defeat their enemies, they break them physically and psychologically. The council chamber filled with murmurs, and what Amanda recognized from her xenolinguistic studies as sounds of disgust. Her father remained perfectly still, his diplomatic mask firmly in place, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Furthermore, another counselor joined in. This one, a Luztan whose light form pulsed with aggressive patterns. Their entertainment media glorifies this violence. They transform their most brutal conflicts into games for their young. They remain the only known species whose military training techniques haven't been significantly modified since their pre-space age. Amanda's hands gripped the railing tighter. They were cherry-picking, showing humanity's worst moments without context, without showing how they'd learned, grown, evolved. The question before us isn't whether to accept humans as equals, Vextra concluded, but whether they qualify as truly sentient by modern standards. Perhaps they are simply clever animals who discovered tools. The laughter that rippled through the chamber was the worst part. Not cruel or mocking, but dismissive. The kind of laughter reserved for a child's naive mistake. They weren't even taking humanity seriously enough to hate them. As her father began his measured diplomatic response, Amanda slipped away from the gallery. Her visitor's credentials would give her access to the council's public archives. If they wanted to cherry-pick human history, fine. But two could play at that game. They had just made a crucial mistake. They had humiliated humanity in front of a teenage girl with too much time on her hands and a perfect understanding of how to navigate alien information systems. The real war was about to begin, and it would start with research. The graduation ceremony at Stanford School of Cynopolitics should have been a celebration. Amanda Mitchell sat among her fellow graduates, her thesis on vulnerabilities in advanced civilizations' social structures already generating buzz in academic circles. 5 years had passed since the council's rejection, but that day still burned in her memory. The emergency broadcast cut through the dean's speech like a plasma torch through hull plating. We interrupt this program for breaking news from New Providence Colony. The Vraxian Empire has launched what they term a minor correctional action against. The holographic display showed what remained of humanity's most ambitious extrasolar settlement. New Providence had been beautiful once, a testament to human adaptation with its massive biodomes and terraforming projects. Now it was just another lesson in alien politics. Amanda's roommate, Sarah, collapsed next to her. "My family," she whispered, her face ash-white. They were all. My little sister was supposed to start school there next week. The death toll scrolled across the bottom of the display. 50,000 colonists. The Vraxian Empire called it a necessary demonstration of proper hierarchical relationships. They expected Earth to protest through diplomatic channels, maybe impose some token sanctions. After all, that's how civilized species handle disagreements. But they didn't know about the file sitting in Amanda's quantum drive. 5 years of meticulous research, analyzing every public record, every trading manifest, every cultural document the council races had made available. The Vraxians, in their arrogance, had never bothered to restrict access to what they considered basic information. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unlisted number. "Ms. Mitchell, that analysis you compiled on Vraxian infrastructure dependencies, is it complete?" She recognized the signature. General Catherine Hayes, Earth Defense Force. The same general who'd politely listened to Amanda's presentation 3 months ago about how the Vraxian Empire's supposed strengths were actually critical weaknesses. Yes, Amanda typed back, including the psychological analysis of their response patterns to asymmetrical threats. They've never faced one. They don't even have protocols for it. Another message. "The Joint Chiefs are meeting in an hour. Your father will be there. We need you both." Amanda looked at Sarah, still sobbing over the family she'd lost, then at the continuing footage of New Providence's destruction. The Vraxians had used their most advanced weaponry, clean, efficient, almost surgical in its precision. They thought this made them civilized. They didn't understand that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones that took their time. Inside the Pentagon's secure briefing room, Amanda stood beside her father. James Mitchell had aged a decade in the past 5 years, but his eyes were sharp as ever. On the screens around them, New Providence still burned. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda's voice was steady as she addressed the assembled military leadership. 5 years ago, I watched aliens mock our species for being savages. Today, they proved they don't know what true savagery is. Let me show you how to dismantle an empire without firing a single shot. The lights dimmed as she brought up her analysis. Supply chain vulnerabilities, psychological pressure points, cultural blind spots that could be exploited. The Vraxians had spent millennia perfecting their energy weapons and shield technologies. They'd never considered that their greatest weakness was their absolute certainty in their own superiority. They expect us to react like them, she concluded, to file protests, to make speeches, to maybe attempt some clumsy military response. But we're going to show them why humans are different. We're not going to fight their war. We're going to fight ours. General Hayes studied the final slide, a detailed breakdown of how the Vraxian shipyard network could be compromised through their own maintenance protocols. "How many casualties?" she asked. Amanda smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "None. That's what will terrify them the most. We're not going to kill them. We're going to educate them." As the military leaders digested her proposal, Amanda's father placed a hand on her shoulder. "I spent years trying to prove we were civilized enough for them," he said quietly. Perhaps it's time to show them why they should be civilized enough for us. The giant was awake, and it would move with surgical precision. Major Jessica Reynolds stood in the shadow of a Vraxian maintenance dock, her adaptive camouflage suit blending perfectly with the metallic walls. The massive structure loomed above her, its crystalline architecture catching the light of 3 moons. 5 years of infiltration training had led to this moment. Ghost lead to control, she subvocalized, the quantum communicator picking up the vibrations in her jaw. Team is in position. Control confirms. Amanda Mitchell's voice came through clearly. Remember, Major, we're not here to destroy. We're here to disappear. Reynolds watched as her 4-person team moved into position. They looked like shadows sliding across shadows, products of Earth's most advanced stealth program. The Vraxians, with their reliance on energy shields and automated defenses, had never conceived of simple optical camouflage. Package Alpha is ready, Lieutenant Cooper whispered through the comm. He'd spent 3 months posing as a maintenance contractor, earning trust, learning routines. The Vraxians never questioned why a primitive species would accept such menial work. Reynolds checked her heads-up display. Throughout the sector, 30 other teams were in similar positions near critical Vraxian ships. Operation Nightmare was about to begin. Execute, she ordered. Cooper's fingers danced across a maintenance terminal. He wasn't hacking. They'd given him the access codes. The Vraxians' own bureaucracy had authorized this terminal for routine navigation system updates. On her HUD, Reynolds watched as green lights began flashing. One by one, Vraxian ships across the sector were accepting the update. An update that would introduce subtle errors into their navigation systems. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make ships appear a few thousand kilometers from their actual positions. Ghost 2, status on package beta. Planted, came the reply. Maintenance robots have been reprogrammed. In 3 weeks, they'll start replacing hull sensors with our modified versions. Reynolds allowed herself a small smile. The Vraxians were about to learn what humanity had known since its first wars. The most effective attacks were the ones you didn't see coming. In the command center back on Earth, Amanda watched data streams flow across her screens. Major, she said, be advised we're seeing increased activity in Section 7. Security sweep incoming. Reynolds pressed herself deeper into the shadows as a patrol of Vraxian guards passed. Their bioluminescent scales glowed softly, a sign of their confidence. They never looked in her direction. Why would they? Their sensors showed nothing. Package Gamma is live, Ghost 3 reported. Fuel mixture ratios have been adjusted within acceptable parameters. Their ships will start experiencing mechanical failures within a month. Control, this is Ghost Lead. Primary objectives complete. Moving to extraction. Confirmed. Ghost Lead. Well done. The giant's claws are in place. As Reynolds led her team through the maintenance tunnels, she reflected on the beauty of their operation. No alarms. No explosions. No dramatic firefights. Just careful preparation and patience. Back on their stealth shuttle, Reynolds received the sector-wide update. Every team had succeeded. 30 critical installations had been compromised, and the Vraxians hadn't detected a thing. Control. Ghost Lead. We're clear. Beginning silent running procedures. Excellent work, Major. Amanda's voice held satisfaction. Phase 1 is complete. The Vraxians won't know they're under attack until their entire fleet starts falling apart around them. Reynolds settled into her command chair as the shuttle slipped away from the Vraxian installation. In the viewport, she could see the massive shipyards continuing their normal operations. They looked so proud, so permanent. Tell me, Control, she asked, how long until they realize? Their first ships should start experiencing mysterious navigation errors in about a week. The real cascade begins in 3 weeks. By then, it'll be too late to stop. And casualties. 0, just like we planned. We're not here to kill them, Major. We're here to show them what real civilization looks like. As the shuttle disappeared into FTL, Reynolds thought about the Vraxians' dismissal of humanity as primitive warriors. They were right about one thing: humans were warriors. But they'd forgotten that the greatest warriors don't just know how to fight. They know how to hunt. Admiral Crix of the Vraxian Empire stood in his private observation deck aboard the Eternal Starforge, watching the massive shipyard dance with activity. Construction drones wove between skeletal frames of new warships, their energy beams precisely crafting the next generation of the Empire's fleet. It was his life's work, the largest shipyard in known space. The first warning came not as an alarm, but as a whisper. "Admiral." His aide's scales shifted to a troubled green. "We're detecting minor gravitational anomalies in Section 47B. Crix dismissed it with a wave. "Normal fluctuations. The artificial gravity field always needs minor adjustments with projects of this scale." "Sir, the anomalies. They're moving, following a pattern." The Admiral turned to face the displays, his own scales darkening with concern. The gravitational disturbances were indeed moving, spreading through the station like a virus, he whispered. The realization came too late. The first visible sign was beautiful in its horror. A half-completed dreadnought began to drift, slowly at first, then with gathering speed. Its frame twisted with impossible grace, metal screaming as gravitational forces pulled it in directions it was never meant to go. "Emergency protocols." Crix sparked. "Shut down all gravity generators." "Systems aren't responding, sir. The commands are being rerouted through maintenance protocols." "That's impossible. We had all systems checked just last week by the human contractors." "Human contractors." Crix felt his blood freeze. Across the vast expanse of the shipyard, gravity began to dance. Construction drones crashed into each other as their navigation systems encountered impossible readings. Partially built ships twisted like flowers blooming in fast forward, their metal petals tearing themselves apart in deadly ballet. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission. Text only." The message appeared on his screen. "From humanity, with love." Crix watched in helpless fury as his masterpiece tore itself apart. Not with crude explosions or primitive projectiles, but with an artist's touch. Each failure triggered another in perfect sequence, like dominoes falling in 3 dimensions. "Get me the council," he demanded. "This is an act of war." "Communications are down, sir. The quantum relays. They're detecting signals from places they can't possibly be. The entire network is confused." The observation deck's windows suddenly polarized, then cleared, then polarized again. The environmental systems began cycling through random settings. Every system that had been upgraded or maintained in the past 3 months was turning against them. A new message appeared. "Civilized enough for you yet? Evacuate the station," Crix ordered, his voice hollow. "Get everyone out." As emergency pods launched from the dying station, Crix realized something that chilled him more than the destruction. There were no alarms, no explosions, no radiation warnings. The humans had turned his own station into a weapon without firing a shot. In her command center on Earth, Amanda Mitchell watched the feeds with clinical satisfaction. "Major Reynolds," she called, "Phase 2 is complete. The Vraxians just learned they don't know everything about warfare." "Casualties?" Reynolds asked. "0, just like we planned. Their evacuation protocols worked perfectly. We made sure of that. They're watching their pride and joy destroy itself, and they can't even claim we killed anyone." The Eternal Starforge continued its death dance, a performance visible from 3 star systems away. The Vraxians would eventually realize that every piece of human-maintained equipment in their empire had similar surprises waiting. Their own maintenance logs would prove they had authorized every upgrade. "Send the final message," Amanda ordered. Across what remained of the Starforge networks, words appeared in every terminal. Lesson 1. The primitive species you mocked understands your technology better than you do. Would you like to continue your education? In his escape pod, Admiral Crix watched his life's work complete its final performance. His scales had turned white, the Vraxian color of absolute terror. Because now he understood, the humans hadn't just been infiltrating their systems. They had been studying their prey. Lieutenant John Cooper had spent 6 months studying Vraxian agricultural practices before he understood their greatest weakness. It wasn't in their advanced hydroponics or their genetic modifications. It was much simpler. They were afraid of the dark. Team, check in. He subvocalized from his position beneath the primary lighting control node of Agricultural Complex 7. Jensen, in position at power distribution. Martinez, ready at backup systems. Williams, monitoring evacuation routes. All this preparation for an attack that wouldn't fire a single shot. The Vraxians, with their bioluminescent scales and evolutionary history on a binary star world, had never truly adapted to darkness. Their entire civilization was built around the assumption of constant light. Execute Operation Nightfall, Cooper ordered. The changes started subtle. In Hydroponic Section 12, the lighting dimmed by 2%, barely noticeable, but enough to trigger a slight stress response in the Vraxian workers. 3 minutes later, Section 15 flickered for 1/10 of a second. "Sir," Martins whispered, "their engineers are checking the systems. They're finding nothing wrong, because technically, nothing is." Cooper smiled. The beauty of their plan lay in its simplicity. They weren't damaging anything, just introducing doubt, uncertainty, and fear. In the control room above, Vraxian technicians were beginning to show signs of stress. Their scales flickered between anxious yellows and disturbed greens as more sections reported minor lighting irregularities. "Phase 2, Cooper commanded. The real art began. Random sections throughout the massive complex experienced rolling brownouts. Each lasted only seconds, but the pattern was unpredictable. Vraxian workers, their species instinctively terrified of darkness, began to work faster, more erratically. "They're making mistakes," Jensen reported. "Quality control just flagged 3 batches of crop supplements. The workers are too rattled to maintain precision." This was just one of 17 agricultural complexes experiencing the same treatment across Vraxian space. Their entire food production network was about to learn a lesson in psychological warfare. "Sir," Williams cut in, first wave of workers requesting shift changes. Their supervisors are denying the requests. They think the workers are being primitive and superstitious. Perfect. The Vraxians' own arrogance was working against them. Their leadership, convinced of their species' superiority, would dismiss the growing fear as weakness to be overcome. Hour by hour, the light became more uncertain. Calibrations drifted just enough to create shadows where there should be none. Critical systems remained fully functional. They weren't monsters, after all. But everything else became subtly, persistently wrong. "Control, this is Cooper. Phase 3 ready. Proceed." Amanda's voice came through clearly. "Remember, we're not here to destroy their food supply. We're here to show them what real psychological warfare looks like." The next stage was beautiful in its simplicity. Every display screen in the complex began showing microsecond flickers, subliminal messages that played on primal Vraxian fears. Ancient predators from their homeworld, lurking in shadows. Their systems registered nothing wrong, but their hindbrains screamed danger. Production numbers began to drop. Not enough to cause a crisis, but enough to introduce doubt into the Empire's most basic systems. How could they trust food produced by terrified workers? How could they maintain quality control when their best people were jumping at shadows? "Sir," Martins reported, "First supervisor just requested a facility-wide shutdown for maintenance. They'll lose a week's production." Cooper nodded. "Exactly as predicted. They'll shut down voluntarily, trying to find hardware problems that don't exist. When they restart, the problems will be even more subtle. They'll never trust their systems again." In her command center, Amanda watched the cascade of effects spreading across Vraxian space. "Well done, Lieutenant. The Vraxians thought psychological warfare meant breaking an enemy's will to fight. We're teaching them it means making them break themselves. As Cooper's team withdrew, leaving no trace of their presence, the Vraxian Empire's mighty agricultural system began to falter. Not with a bang, but with a flicker. Sometimes, the most devastating weapons were the ones you couldn't see at all. Dr. Emma Blackwood stood before the Galactic Council, her presentation ready. The emergency session had been called after the systematic disruption of Vraxian infrastructure had become impossible to ignore. The council chamber, once a place of enlightened discourse, now thrummed with tension. Distinguished members of the council, she began, her voice steady. You requested an analysis of human military doctrine. I'm afraid you've been asking the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking how we fight. You should be asking how we hunt. The holographic display activated, showing ancient cave paintings from Earth. Hunters stalking prey, working in groups, using tools and strategy. Humanity never evolved past being predators, Emma continued, pacing the chamber floor. We evolved to be better ones. While your species sought to transcend their primitive natures, we refined ours. She gestured, and the display shifted to modern military training exercises. Notice the similarities. The patience, the coordination, the strategic thinking. We didn't abandon our hunting instincts. We applied them to everything from corporate takeovers to space exploration. High Counselor Vextra's scales flickered with distress. Are you suggesting your species is proud of remaining primitive? Primitive. Emma laughed softly. Let's examine the Starforge incident. No direct confrontation. No wasted resources. Instead, we studied our prey's patterns, identified vulnerabilities, and struck precisely where you were weakest. Tell me, Counselor, what's primitive about that? The display changed again, showing the carefully orchestrated cascade of failures across Vraxian space. Your civilization is built on the assumption that advanced species naturally abandon their aggressive instincts. We built ours on understanding when to use them. But the agricultural attacks, another counselor interjected, the psychological warfare, are exactly what our ancestors did. Emma nodded. They didn't always kill their prey directly. Sometimes, they pursued them until exhaustion. Sometimes, they disrupted their feeding patterns. Sometimes, they simply made them too afraid to eat or sleep properly. We call it persistence hunting, and we've had hundreds of thousands of years to perfect it. She pulled up comparison charts. Your military doctrine focuses on overwhelming force. Ours focuses on understanding our prey. Yes, prey. At a fundamental level. You build bigger weapons. We learn what makes you afraid. The chamber erupted in murmurs as Emma displayed classified Vraxian psychological reports. Your own analysts noted that humans seem to switch between sophisticated civilization and primitive aggression with disturbing ease. You saw it as a weakness. It's actually our greatest strength. We write poetry about flowers while instinctively calculating kill zones. We compose symphonies while maintaining the ability to track prey across light years. We didn't choose between civilization and our predatory nature. We learned to be both simultaneously. The display showed the aftermath of the agricultural complex incidents. No deaths, no direct damage. Just carefully applied pressure to existing psychological fault lines. This isn't primitive warfare. This is art. But why? Vextra demanded. Why demonstrate this capability without inflicting actual damage? Emma's smile was all predator. Because, Counselor, a true apex predator doesn't need to kill to prove its dominance. We're not trying to destroy the Vraxian Empire. We're teaching it respect. She gestured one final time, and the display showed Earth's original council application. You called us primitive because we retained our aggressive instincts. We're showing you why those instincts were worth keeping. A truly advanced civilization doesn't pretend to be above its nature. It masters it. The council chamber had grown very quiet. Emma could see the realization spreading across alien faces. They hadn't been fighting primitives. They'd been fighting something far more dangerous. Predators who had learned to think strategically, to use technology, to plan long-term campaigns. In conclusion, she said softly, humanity never needed to prove we were civilized enough for the Council. The Council needed to prove it was wise enough to recognize different forms of civilization. The Vraxian Empire is learning that lesson now. The only question is, how many more demonstrations will be required? As she gathered her materials to leave, Emma noted with satisfaction that several Council member species were showing their respective fear responses. They were finally beginning to understand. Humanity hadn't survived its violent past by accident. They had mastered it. The Council chamber felt different now. Amanda Mitchell stood at the same podium where her father had stood 5 years ago, but the atmosphere had changed. Gone was the casual superiority, the dismissive amusement. Now, there was only tense silence. Distinguished members of the Council, she began, her voice carrying the same diplomatic tone her father had used. 5 years ago, I sat in that gallery and watched you mock my species. Today, I'm here to complete your education. A holographic display activated, showing a comprehensive breakdown of every operation conducted against the Vraxian Empire. The Council members shifted uncomfortably as they recognized the patterns. Notice something interesting? Amanda asked, her smile razor-sharp. 0 casualties. Not a single death in all our operations. We could have killed thousands. Instead, we chose to teach. She brought up the Starforge footage, a masterpiece of engineering, destroyed without a single loss of life. Your evacuation protocols worked perfectly, because we made sure they would. We weren't trying to murder. We were making a point. High Counselor Vextra's scales had turned a pale blue of uncertainty. You expect us to believe this restraint was intentional? Computer, Amanda commanded. Display case study 47B. The holographic display shifted to show detailed plans for completely destroying the Vraxian Empire's infrastructure. Power grids, food supplies, communication networks, everything mapped out with terrifying precision. These are the plans we didn't use, Amanda explained. We could have crashed your entire civilization. Instead, we chose to demonstrate why you should respect ours. She walked around the podium, her steps measured and confident. You called us primitive because we retain our aggressive instincts. But true civilization isn't about denying our nature. It's about choosing when and how to use it. The display shifted again, showing the agricultural complex operations. You thought psychological warfare meant breaking an enemy's spirit. We showed you it means understanding their psychology so well that you can reshape their behavior without them even realizing it. But why? Another counselor asked. Why show us these capabilities? Amanda's expression softened slightly. Because the galaxy needs both our approaches. Your technological advancement, your focus on logic and rationality. These are valuable. But so is our understanding of conflict, our ability to balance civilization with our deeper nature. She brought up the original footage they used to mock humanity. You showed our wars as evidence of our savagery. But look closer. In every era, even at our most violent, humans were also creating art, advancing science, writing poetry. We never chose between being civilized and being dangerous. We learned to be both. The chamber was silent as she continued. Every operation we conducted was designed to prove a point. The Starforge. To show we understand your technology better than you think. The agricultural complexes. To demonstrate our grasp of psychological warfare. The navigation system failures. To prove we can win without fighting. Amanda's voice grew quieter, but somehow more intense. You thought you were dealing with primitives who needed to be taught civilization. Instead, you found teachers who understood something you'd forgotten. True strength isn't about denying your nature. It's about mastering it. She pressed a button, and the display showed updated plans for Earth's Council membership. We're not asking to join the Council anymore. We're offering you the chance to join us in creating something better. A civilization that combines your technological advancement with our understanding of conflict and resolution. And if we refuse? Vextra asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then we continue the lessons, Amanda replied simply. We have so many more to teach. The council chamber erupted in discussion, but Amanda could see in their expressions that they understood. They hadn't just underestimated humanity's capabilities, they'd fundamentally misunderstood what made a species truly civilized. As she gathered her materials, Amanda touched the diplomatic insignia she'd inherited from her father. He had tried to prove humanity's civilization through peace alone. She had proved it through the controlled application of force. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was education. The council chambers had never seen a ceremony quite like this. As Amanda Mitchell took her seat at the newly installed Earth delegation's position, she couldn't help but appreciate the symbolism. The seat wasn't placed below the other council members as was traditional for new species, but at equal height. They'd earned that much respect. Before we begin this historic session, Amanda announced, standing once more, I have one final presentation for the council. Consider it a graduation gift. Her fingers danced across the console, and individual data packets appeared on each council member's private display. The reaction was immediate and visceral. The Luz-10 representative's light form flickered erratically. Vextra's scales turned pure white. What you're looking at, Amanda continued calmly, are detailed plans for how humanity could have completely destroyed each of your civilizations, not just militarily, but culturally, economically, and psychologically. Each plan is specifically tailored to your species' unique vulnerabilities. The Artaxian representative, a being of living crystal, chimed in distress. These plans, they're comprehensive. Years of work. 5 years, to be precise. Amanda nodded. Since the day you rejected Earth's membership, while I was compiling data on the Vraxians, I was studying all of you as well. Every trade route, every cultural weakness, every philosophical blind spot. She let that sink in before continuing. The Vraxians weren't special. They were just the first lesson. We could have implemented similar operations against any of you, at any time. But you didn't, Vextra observed, his scales slowly returning to their normal hue. No, we didn't, Amanda agreed. We chose not to. Remember that the next time you mistake kindness for weakness. The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just outmaneuvered one of the most powerful empires in known space. They'd been capable of doing it to everyone. Computer, Amanda commanded, implement final protocol. Every display in the chamber suddenly went dark, then relit with a simple message. All files successfully deleted. Those were the only copies of those plans, she explained. Consider it a gesture of good faith. We're not here to threaten or dominate. We're here to contribute, but we'll do it as equals, not supplicants. The High Council Chair, a being of pure energy, spoke for the first time. You've changed the fundamental balance of galactic politics. No, Amanda corrected gently. We've restored it. True civilization isn't about pretending to be above conflict. It's about understanding conflict so deeply that you can choose peace from a position of strength. She gestured to the chamber around them. This council represents the pinnacle of technological achievement, but you've forgotten something essential. Civilization isn't about transcending our natures. It's about mastering them. One by one, the council members nodded in understanding. The galaxy was entering a new era. The species they had dismissed as primitives had become their teachers, showing them blind spots they never knew they had. I move to formally recognize Earth's full council membership, Vextra announced, his scales now showing the deep blue of profound respect. Not because they proved themselves civilized by our standards, but because they proved our standards needed revision. The vote was unanimous. As the ceremonial protocols proceeded, Amanda thought about that angry teenager in the gallery 5 years ago. She'd wanted revenge then, wanted to make them pay for their arrogance. Instead, she'd done something far more significant. She'd changed how an entire galaxy understood civilization itself. Her father, watching from the diplomatic gallery, caught her eye and nodded. His approach of pure diplomacy and her approach of controlled strength had finally merged into something new. A true balance of power and wisdom. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps that had been the greatest lesson of all, that true civilization wasn't about choosing between our nature and our advancement. It was about having the wisdom to use both.